So this week I'm going to be doing something slightly different. So this week I'm not going to be doing a completed piece of art. I'm guiding you through the process. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go absolutely back to basics, back to the very beginning. Because what I've found this week is I'm looking at different forums and people that are emailing me, asking me questions. And a lot of you are quite new and are struggling. So I'm here to help. So my name's Claire and I am a printmaker and teacher based in the UK. And what I'm going to be doing today is take you right back to the beginning to how much paint to use, papers, the brayer I'm using, the different types of paints you can use. So right back to the very beginning. If that's not for you and you prefer my more complex prints that I do, then hop on to another video. There are lots and lots of different content on my videos for you to watch there. So what I'll do is I'll also drop the link below to sign up to my newsletter, my email list, and you will receive a welcome email that has 2 free videos in there. One, mastering, it's a little free mini course, mastering the one pull print. So that's something you may enjoy, especially if you've enjoyed today and it's just about trying something a little bit different and a little bit more complex. And also, you may know that I'm quite into my botanicals and capturing that beautiful detail. So there is also a video on there that is about preparing your botanicals for gel printing as well. So sign up to the newsletter and you'll get those free videos straight to your inbox as well. You can also join the waitlist to my online course, which is Pushing the Boundaries. So that's not a beginner's course. That is really all about the last 15 years of me really pushing and trying to control a gel plate that doesn't really want to be controlled. But that's been my challenge over the last 15 years, is really kind of exploring it and pushing it to its absolute limit. So that's there if you're interested in that as well. But for today, let's get printing. So I'm not saying that you go against anything that's recommended by the manufacturers. What I'm going to tell you today is just purely based on my own experience. So when I store my gel plate, I have my gel plate stored just between 2 sheets of copy paper, and that's stored back in its clamshell loosely, just like this. The reason I disregard the acetate that your plate originally comes in is that what happens with the acetate is that it traps air underneath the acetate. So you kind of get bubbles appearing on your gel prints. And those bubbles, if that's what you've done, don't worry about it too much, because those bubbles after a few prints will disappear. But you do find you get bubbles with trapped air, where if you just use a piece of Copier paper and smooth it out before you store them, you'll eliminate those bubbles. So when I peel back my Copier paper, I don't know whether you can see that on the camera, but it leaves like a, how would you describe it? Almost like a residue behind. Now again, this could just be me making this up, but my interpretation of this is the minerals that's escaping from the plate, and those minerals are essential. So if I were to clean my gel plate by submerging it into water or under running water, in my mind, I'm washing away those essential minerals. So that's why I only clean my gel plate with either baby wipes or a damp cloth. I've had my gel plates now for 15 years. I do regular workshops, I take them into schools. They are absolutely hammered, and I have found that I've never had to use baby oil to clean them. Not that I'm saying it won't work, but I've never needed to. And my plates have lasted, like I say, for 15 years. So I think if you look after your plate, it will last you a long time. And actually, I'm really, if you've seen any of my other videos, I'm quite experimental. I use lots of different medias and things on my plates. So they are well used and well tested. So first thing I do is I remove the Copier paper and the clamshell, and I place my gel plate onto a white surface. So I've just got a large piece of white paper here, and I do that because at the beginning it helps me kind of see what colours are like the true colours by putting it on a white background. This is quite a stained plate. It's got like a yellowy tinge to it. That's perfectly normal. As you're using different paints and different medias, you will find your plate stains, and that's just part and parcel of it. But you will actually find a well-used plate will give you better prints. The more you use it, the better your prints will become. Okay, so I use a brayer to apply my paint to the gel plate the majority of the time, and I have two different types of brayers. And really, it's just a price difference. So these retail, you know, between £7 and £8 on Amazon compared to 20 something pounds. So this is a speedball roller, and this is just your standard SD roller or brayer. Does it make a difference when you're starting out? Not really. I always use these in workshops. It doesn't really make any difference to my print. The only thing I would say is when you start getting into image transfer, I find the speedball roller does make a difference to me, not to the actual quality of my finished print, but to the ease in which it helps me to get there. But you certainly don't need it to start off. Don't be fooled that, okay, I'm going to buy the expensive roller, so now all my gel prints are going to work. That's not going to happen. Okay, so they're the brayers. Let's talk papers, okay? I'm going to keep it to 3 very basic papers. So I personally do a lot of my gel printing onto this, and can you hear the weight? So this is 160 GSM, and it's just cartridge paper, white cartridge paper out of a sketchbook. The thing with this paper is it's quite flexible, so it's going to peel off the gel plate. Does it matter if it's a little bit thinner or a little bit heavier? Not necessarily. With gel printing, it's the characteristic of the paper that you're looking for. So what works particularly well about this paper is it's smooth. And that's what you're looking for on the gel plate, is smooth paper is always going to adhere to the gel plate, make better contact, and therefore pull a cleaner print. I also have just regular Copier paper. I use this, you know, it's up to you if you want to just use Copier paper when you're first starting out. The reason I have stepped up is because the things with Copier paper is, I would say once you go beyond 2 layers, and what I mean is you've got 2 layers of paint pulling off onto your paper, the Copier paper is more at risk of buckling and tearing on your gel plate, where this is just a little bit heavier and will just take more layers of paint. But I totally agree, when you're first practicing and starting off, Copier paper is absolutely fine. Now, if you're looking to create more collage type papers that have a transparent or translucent quality, this is my go-to paper. Now again, I could name 10 or 12 different papers on the market, but I'm sticking to the basics. So, especially in the UK, this is quite an inexpensive, it's wet strength tissue paper from Carnival, and it's quite a cost-effective way of creating transparent papers. And it has a rough side on one side and a smooth side on the other. And what I do is I print on the smooth side. And again, where the paint is will stay solid when you come to layer it in a collage, but where you've got areas of this white paper that's untreated, with a medium, that will disappear. But again, we're getting into more complex techniques, but I just wanted to kind of talk about the 3 main papers that I use. Okay, so paints come in different kind of types of paint. So you will probably all have heard of opaque. So opaque paints, in theory, and I'll talk about this in a little bit more detail in a minute, in theory, an opaque paint should block out what is underneath it, okay? Whereas a transparent, you will be able to see, it's the opposite, you will be able to see the layers that are underneath that paint. You can also get metallic. Now in this brand, I found that the metallic is more opaque. So you get that lovely kind of coverage and the lovely shimmer, the metallic shimmer, whether it's gold, silver, or in this case, copper. But you still get that definition when you're building layers that you would get with an opaque paint. Whereas this one here that says Diner, this is an iridescent paint. Now what I found with the iridescent paints are, they're not as opaque. So you get that beautiful, soft, shimmer, metallic, gorgeous look to your print, but you don't get as much definition when coming to layer, and it acts more as a transparent paint. That said, because a lot of questions I get is how do you choose between an opaque paint and a transparent and when to use them? I tend to use and consider all of my paints as a transparent paint. The reason why it can be quite misleading that you think an opaque paint is going to completely block out the colour underneath. Paints, when you're using them on the gel plate, or however the way I use them on the gel plate, are very, very thin layers because I'm after definition and I'm after detail. And the way to achieve that is by using much thinner layers of paint. So therefore, my paints, when I'm using them, are not as opaque as I think they're going to be. To create more opacity, I find I have to layer multiple times on top of each other to create that opacity in more complex prints, okay? So I treat all my paints with a view of there's going to be some transparency there. How would you go about it? So my recommendation would be is to just get a piece of white paper and draw some black lines down your paper. And if you want me to do this and video it, drop me a comment. I'd be happy to do it. I just don't want to bore you through that process. But, you know, some thick, bold with a Sharpie, black lines. And because what I've seen other people do is they then get a paintbrush and they brush over the black marks to see how transparent their paint is. That's all well and good, but you're not applying your paint with a paintbrush. You're applying your paint with a brayer that's going to be much thinner. So what I advise you to do is then literally use the gel plate and apply just little bands of colour and allow them to overlap, and then you will start to learn the true opacity of an acrylic paint. And if you overlap each time just slightly as you're doing it, you will then also see how one layer of paint sits against another. This is an example from my Rex Ray project where I did exactly that. So I used the different paints and overlapped them slightly so I could see what colour combinations I was going to achieve and how one would cover the other. So you can see here where I've got the green and the orange. In theory, that green should have completely blocked out that orange, but it doesn't. It's made like an almost muddy colour. So that instantly made me realise, well, actually, I don't want to use those colours next to each other on my print. Otherwise, I'm going to get this muddy colour. Again, with the lighter colours, this Titan Buff, in theory, with an opaque paint, that should have covered, but it doesn't. It just kind of dulls down the paint grey from the side, okay? So these were all opaque paints. So just by doing something simple like this before you start a project can really help you understand your paints. Again, another question that crops up quite often is, how much do I need to spend on paints? Okay, so the range I just showed you from Copier, I use for the majority of my workshops and my printing, okay? It's perfectly adequate. But then I do have some of the Amsterdam series, the Liquitex Basics and the Liquitex Heavy Body, okay? In terms of cost, this is the most expensive. And out of all my paint, you can see by how little I've used, I find it the hardest to work with. Because it's a heavy body acrylic, I find it very hard to get a nice, smooth, even coat on my plate. I find it leaves quite a lot of texture. So it's not always the most expensive works best. Again, it's your personal preference. I particularly like the Liquitex Basics range and the Amsterdam range, as well as the Copier range. Can you use cheaper craft paints? Of course you can. Again, it's just about knowing and understanding the paint you've got. So it doesn't really matter what you use, you just need to understand the properties of the paint you've got. So, you know, try those exercises, layer in to understand what your paints can do before you even start. So how much paint to use on your gel plate? So again, I can only talk from my experience and what I want to achieve from my gel prints. And that is definition, texture, and detail, okay? And the way to achieve that on a gel plate is with very, very thin layers of paint. So I'm not saying you can't use thicker layers of paint. If you want to be more free and expressive, that's entirely up to you. It's whatever you want to get out of your gel printing. But for me, it's about the detail that I'm looking for. So how much paint do I use? So this is an 8x10 gel plate. And if I try and tilt the plate, can you see how big my blobs are? Technical term there, how big my blobs are. I've got 2 small blobs of paint. Now, what people tend to do is they think, okay, I want to use multiple colours, and that is absolutely fine. But they put 2 blobs of every colour on. And that's something, the more colours you add, the less paint of each colour you need to add. So you only really need 2 blobs of paint to cover an 8x10 gel plate. So if you want to use 2 colours, you just want to use 1 blob of each. If you want to use 4 colours, you need to do much smaller blobs and just do smaller blobs of each colour. So distributing and rolling this paint out on your gel plate. If you see what I'm doing, I'm not going forwards, back, because essentially what you're doing is putting the paint on, taking it off. What I'm doing is I'm lifting the roller. It doesn't matter whether you go forwards or backwards, but I'm lifting the roller each time to distribute that paint nice and evenly across the gel plate, okay? Now, if you're getting lines like this, you are pressing too hard. When I'm rolling my paint on the gel plate, can you see that I'm hardly putting any pressure on at all? So it's a really light touch. If your roller is not rolling and it's sliding, then that's an indication you've got way too much paint. You can also tell your levels of paint by the texture that's left on your roller and the texture that's left on your plate. You're always looking for smooth. So if this is really stippled, you've got way too much paint on your roller. Okay, so I'm just going to pop, I'm just using Copier paper because we're just having a play today, just showing you how it works. And I've laid my piece of Copier paper down and given it a good rub with the palm of my hand to make good contact on the gel plate. What I want to avoid doing is this, because all I'm doing is pressing and putting individual weight on different parts of my gel plate. I'm not making good smooth contact throughout, okay? While that's sitting on my plate, I just want to draw your attention again to my roll-off sheet. Another way to measure your paint is really off your roll-off sheet as well. If this is coming off where you're really having to cover the entire sheet of paper and maybe going on to a second piece, again, that can be an indication that you're using far too much paint. You can see on my roll-off sheet there, it's a little bit thicker there, but the majority, there's very little paint left over. Okay? So your roll-off sheet can be a really good indication. I just let that sit while I was talking for what, few seconds, minute at the most. And then I'm going to pull that off my plate. Now again, what you're aiming for is this plate to be clear and for everything to be transferred onto the paper. So things that could affect that, drying times. You do have to think about whether you, like for us in the UK at the moment, it is gone really damp, really miserable. So things are taking much longer to dry. So, and I mean big differences. So for some techniques, what was drying in say an hour or 2 hours is got to be left at least overnight and well into the next day for it to dry thoroughly. And the thicker you put your paint on, the longer it's going to take to dry. Okay. So that is just a basic one colour print. Okay, so what I'm going to show you now is a basic way of starting and beginning to build layers on your gel plate. Okay. And again, something often people struggle with is what's the difference between a stencil and a mask? Okay. And I actually think this is really quite confusing because a stencil can be used as a stencil and as a mask. And I'm going to explain and show you that in a minute. But I'm also going to show you then how masks work as well. So these are just some homemade masks that I've made. So I'm going to show you how masks work independently as well. Okay, so I'm going to use quite a contrasting colour. One, so you can see what I'm doing really clearly for the camera. And two, because I know that this is an opaque paint, but from experience, I know it's going to cover the copper that I've just created my background with. Okay, so I'm going for my 2 blobs again. So same amount of paint, and I'm using my brayer in the same way to distribute that nice and evenly across my plate. Now, that first blob was a little bit watery where I didn't shape my paint first. So I'm just going to add a little bit more. That's better. Got a better coverage there. If you find you have got too much paint on your plate, the easiest way to get rid of it is on your roll-off sheet. So just rub into the side. Okay. And I'm going to place my stencil down onto my gel plate, and I'm going to use that copper background that I created, and I'm going to lay that on top and really use my fingers. Oh, not do that and rip it. That's part and parcel of the problem of using copier paper. A thicker paper wouldn't have done that. But really using your fingers to get in between all those shapes on your stencil, because that's what a stencil does, is you are lifting the paint through the stencil to create that pattern. Now, if I was just to pull this straight back and take it off the plate and found that I'd missed a part of the stencil, there is no way I would get that back in exactly the same place. So what I do is I always keep one hand firmly on the gel plate, and I start at the top and I work down from the top to the middle. Okay. And then when I get to the middle, I move my hand and I start then from the bottom to the middle. So I'm working from the top to the middle and then from the bottom to the middle to make sure I have not missed anything. Okay, so that way when I peel it back, I've got a nice pattern transferred across my background. So that is the stencil. So that's what it looks like when you use it as a stencil. But then it's also acted as a mask. And what that means is the mask has blocked the areas of paint underneath. So you then get a negative shape, which is from the mask. And again, I'm just going to use the copper background to place that down. Give it a good rub to make good contact. And again, I've got very hot hands, so I find it dries quite quick with the heat of my hands. Yes, you can use a cool hairdryer. That does speed up the process because you want this to dry. You want this to dry on the paper so it peels it away from the gel plate. So if you do use a hairdryer, make sure it's on a cool setting. And a good way to tell if something's dry is when you put your hand down, if it feels cold, like really cold, it's still wet. If it just feels like normal room temperature, it's not going to feel hot. You're not going to feel any heat off it. But if it just feels normal kind of room temperature, then it's dry. So let's give that a go. And there you can see it's pulled that off the plate. So we have the stencil used as a mask and the stencil as a stencil. Okay, so another question that crops up a lot is, how do you know which colour to put down first? Okay, I'm going to again do a simple exercise with these homemade masks like I showed you before to show how a mask works slightly different than a stencil. Because what you're looking for with masks is you're looking for what I call windows, holes where you're going to be able to see through to the layer below. And I'm going to stick to the same two colours that we've been using throughout. And I'm going to pull one layer on the copper and one layer on the paint grey so we can do a comparison. In theory, they are both opaque paints, so they should both cover the other colour, but let's see. So I'm going to start with the paint grey first. Again, 2 blobs of colour. Lifting my brayer to get that nice even distribution across my gel plate. Very light touch. Aiming for that nice smoothness. And then I'm going to lay down my masks quite randomly. They can overlap, so that's absolutely fine. Let's go that one there. And there. Let's have that there. And that there. Okay, that'll do. So I'm now going to go with my copper background first. Lay that over the top. Again, using my fingers, palm of my hand to rub and get around those masks, get inside them. Okay, so now if we pull that back, you can see how the paint grey has covered our copper background to create those shapes. Now, there is going to be paint left underneath our masks. So this would be a nice time, what I use, for the wet strength tissue paper to pick up this gorgeous layer, because I don't want to waste it. So, piece of wet strength tissue paper, I'm putting it smooth side down, trying to put it quite across the top, and then smoothing it down with my hand as I go, because tissue paper will naturally make wrinkles, and you do kind of just really have to embrace those wrinkles. Again, let that sit for a few minutes. The longer that sits, it will dry, make better contact, and pull that layer off. So I left this the time it took for me to clean my brayer. I don't often clean my plate and my brayer down in between. Gel prints, do it at the end of each session, but not so much in between. But when you're looking at how colours are responding with each other, I think it's quite important to clean your brayer when you're changing to a different colour. So you can see you've got that lovely pattern from the mask. So let's switch to the copper this time. Copper paint. So we're going to see how the masks work now layering the copper. Did you notice my blob was quite big? So that's why I'm not using 2 blobs, because that blob is bigger. But again, distributing that nice and evenly across the plate. So what we're going to test now is using the masks, but putting the copper on top of the Payne's grey rather than the Payne's grey on top of the copper, to see how, which layer, which order the paint goes in, because it's all about what you want to achieve at the end of the day. So I'm going to pop these down again. Let's go that side. Let's introduce that this time a little bit more. Again, not really thinking about it too much, just we're only playing, just a little test. That'll do. Okay, so this time we're going in with the Payne's grey. Again, giving it a good rub, getting my fingers in between those shapes to make really good contact, to increase the definition. You could use a clean brayer, or even your dirty brayer if you don't mind the back of your prints getting messy. But I'm very much a tactile printer. I like to feel my way around things. So I'm quite happy to get messy hands. But if you do want to protect your hand, you could use a brayer. So again, if I pull that up, oh, got my mask at the same time there. Just pop that back down a sec. Okay, you can see there, if we compare that, that's worked out quite well. But it's a completely different print than what we had the other way. So in answer to your question, yes, it does matter which paint you put down first, but it all depends on the outcome you want to achieve. And again, the only real way of figuring this out is by experimentation. There is no shortcut to this. You really do just have to have a play and find out what works well for you and what colour combinations you like. So what would I do with these now? The first thing I'd do is I would write the paints that I've put. So the paints that I've used: metallic, iridescent copper, 355, Copier brand, because the brand is important as well. Again, opaque, Payne's grey, number 40. But what's important that I would also put is the layer So what I put down first, so I would put 1 copper, 2 masks, 3 Payne's grey to lift. Don't have to write an essay, but I treat these as like a recipe book. And if you put them in a sketchbook or a folder, it doesn't matter how you store them. You just want to store them so you've got reference. So if you want to recreate something or you want to develop and you want to learn, you can go back and see what you did last time. So for me, that was quite an important exercise because I actually really love this. I would definitely use that combination again. That one, not so much. I've still got paint again under those masks. So I'm going to peel those back. And hopefully, I was talking a little while, so it may well have dried, but let's give it a go. I'm going to go back onto that wet strength tissue paper again. So the same piece. So laying it down, smoothing it out with my hands and making good contact. I'm going to leave that down for a minute or so and just talk to you a little bit and hope you found that helpful. Please drop me a line in the comments. Let me know if it was helpful. Let me know if I'm on the right track and I'm explaining things or I'm completely overcomplicating and making it worse. Do let me know. It's a bit strange really that you spend your life sometimes as a teacher talking into a camera and you don't have that same feedback that I'm used to getting in a physical classroom. Because let's face it, 30 teenagers would soon let you know if they weren't happy. So please comment. I am here to help. If you have any questions, again, please drop them in the comments. I will get back to you as soon as I can. I don't use bots or anything. I am a one-woman kind of band, so to speak. So please bear with me, but I will answer your questions to the best of my ability. And I'm here to help. So do reach out. Don't think that any question is too simple or basic, and because I guarantee somebody else is thinking exactly the same thing. So while I've been whittering on, that will have dried, so we can end on pulling this final layer onto the wet strength tissue paper. And I would say for a little kind of practice exercise, we've learned a lot and we've got maybe 2, not so keen on that, 2 really nice prints to build on. Where would I go from here? Okay, we've done 1 layer with just the backgrounds and then we've done a second layer. I would stop there and practice. Try different stencils, different masks, maybe different textures. Doesn't have to be a stencil or a mask. Anything you want that you can press into the gel plate that's obviously not sharp, that's going to leave a mark. Okay, and just play with different combinations, layering in different orders, and really get to understand the materials you've got. Don't go out and buy anything. Please don't go out and buy anything. The important thing is you explore and experiment with what you've got, because that's how you learn and understand before you can then make informed decisions on what you need to go out and buy. Okay, once you've got this, then start progressing onto different techniques and adding a 3rd layer. Okay, then look at building layers slowly until you become more confident. I can only talk from my experience, but human nature for me, success builds my confidence. If I'm continually failing at something, then that is going to affect my confidence. So by not running before you can walk and really slowing down, taking each stage at a time, really experimenting, really learning each bit individually, you will become more successful, and then your confidence will increase. And before you know it, you will be pulling the prints like my Rex Ray I think we worked out it had 27 different layers to it. Okay, it is possible, you will get there, but just take it one step at a time. So I really hope you've enjoyed it. Hope to see you on a new video soon. Let me know if this was helpful and you want me to do more basic videos, or you think, Claire, no, get back to what you were doing. I want to see those more complex prints. All, you know, let me know.